From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to the show ender of Film Music Live for the year. And we've got a great way to go out on. So stay tuned, and I'm happy to have you here. One might say that composer Joby Talbot has had a particular sweet tooth for imaginative fairy tales and delicious humor. He'd start out with future Wonka songwriter and collaborator Neil Hannon as part of the Northern Ireland pop group The Divine Comedy, before Hannon provided the tune So Long and Thanks for All the Fish for Talbot's breakout film score with the film version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. While handling grave robbers and dystopian superheroes among his many credits since, Talbot's particularly enchanting scoring has included Penelope, Son of Rambo, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and the two Sing animated smashes. Now, Talbot's song producing and scoring talents are back in Hannon's company for the first time, with Paddington director Paul King for the daunting task of playing an origin story for no less than Willy Wonka. But this is a way less dark chocolate maker than we've come to know, as Talbot and Hannon provide a gloriously funny and enchanted sound of sweet, sparkling innocence and perseverance for a Candyman out to conquer the world. Like Hannon's songs, it's scoring with an energetic show tune quality, full of melodically sparkling wonder and more than a bit of sneakiness for Hugh Grant's scene-stealing Oompa Loompa. Talbot's vibrantly scoring confection is sure to put him on a whole new stage for a grand, tastily fun take on Wonka. And now let's welcome a composer with a chocolate river of pure scoring imagination, Joby Talbot.
Hi, Daniel. Great to be here. How are you?
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. It's been a long while since we've connected, way back in the day with Penelope. A wonderful score, and this is a whole other scale of fairy tale. Well, I mean, for American listeners, you really got your big start with the Divine Comedy, with Neil, who became the songwriter of Wonka. For us not in the know about the Divine Comedy, tell us about it.
Well, I met Neil in a pub in North London when he was about to go on stage supporting some kind of one of those many thousands of indie bands that kind of washed through London in the 1990s. He had a friend of mine, an old roommate from college, was playing cello in his band. It wasn't a normal band. The lineup of this band at the time when I joined was piano, which was me, guitar, violin, and cello. So this is not your straight down the line rock band. And I was really kind of got along with Neil. He's an amazing songwriter. He's one of the most exceptional musicians I've ever met. And next thing we knew, the band started to be successful. And 8 years later, I finally thought maybe it had run its course for me, and we parted ways. And that was in like 2001. So I was those years saw me like go through do my master's degree in composition at the Guildhall School of Music. So I was always like juggling my own projects with working on Neil's big project, The Divine Comedy, and eventually the kind of balance. There was so much of my own stuff happening that I couldn't really stay on the road with Neil. I mean, and we were busy. There was a couple of years there where I didn't even have an apartment because there was no point. We were on the tour bus all the time. So, but we had a proper adventure. We didn't come to America. We came to America a couple of times, just me and Neil. But with the full band, we toured all around Europe all the time. Went to Japan, and just had a blast. These kind of young guys in their kind of mid-20s. It was super fun.
Now, how did you first come aboard Wonka with Neil?
Well, I'd heard that Neil was doing this, and a few friends had said, "Hey, are you working on this with Neil?" We hadn't worked as you mentioned in the intro. I got him on board to sing the closing titles version of So Long, Thanks for All the Fish and Hitchhikers, and that was back in 2005, I think. And that's the last time we worked together. We saw each other, pretty regularly. I go and catch his shows when he came to London. He moved from London to Ireland, where he now lives. So we didn't see each other very much, but we were kind of vaguely in touch. And I'd heard he was doing Wonka, and actually I had dinner with him during that period, and I said, "Oh, who's scoring it?" And he's like, "I don't know." I was like, "Well, maybe I'll get the call." And then, sure enough, I did get the call. I got a call from Paul King's people. Could I come into the cutting room and watch the movie down and talk to Paul? And that's where it all began. I didn't know Paul before. Obviously, I knew his work. I'm a big fan of the Paddington movies and the Mighty Boosh, which is I don't know how big a thing that is in America, but in England, it was a big deal. Very, very funny, weird, surreal, quirky comedy show. It was a big hit in Britain. Yeah, and I watched it. Was sort of obviously blown away, and thought, well, I'm not going to turn this down if they offer it to me. So when they did, I jumped at it.
Now, I want to give a big thanks to Water Tower Music for providing us with 5 digital downloads or golden tickets for the first 5 questions, so send them in. And we have our first one from Ivan at the Bomb Music. Now, it's not so easy doing scores for a movie which also contains songs. Did songs add some creative problems, or was it a nice and easy task on Wonka from beginning to end?
It was not a nice and easy task from beginning to end. No, it was very hard. I would say, I was talking with Jeremy Holland-Smith, who was my kind of, man Friday on this whole project. My kind of right-hand guy who helped me through this to, avoid too much in the way of a nervous breakdown. And we reckon that probably all told about 90% of the work we did on this project was to do with the songs. The songs were in, they were in some, they'd done before I came on board, they'd done pre-records of the songs and then shot to them. And some of those songs, the basic shape of them and the sort of idea of the arrangements isn't a million miles away from what's ended up on the movie. But some of them not so much. I mean, they needed a completely fresh approach. Some of the songs were no longer living in the same part of the film, or were attached to the same bit of narrative, and needed a whole different energy and a whole fresh way of looking at it. And some of the songs didn't end up in the movie at all. So that process of trying stuff, seeing what worked, whilst the whole thing is kind of, the film was very much in flux. It wasn't a straightforward. I think all directors have got different ways of working, and Paul's way of working is very organic. He's really prepared to go in a direction that may end up not being the right direction, and really explore it and be 100% sure that's not going to work, and then go back. And evidently, his approach works brilliantly well. But it's not the easiest. I knew it wasn't going to be the easiest project, but I knew it was going to be worth it in the end. And so we had. I was one of the first things I said to Paul when I met him that first time was that I thought it was really imperative that whoever scored the movie should also arrange the songs so they lived in the same world, because the world of Wonka it's so specific. It's kind of hermetically sealed. It's very much the same thing. It's beautiful. It's subtle. It's kind of strange, magical, weird, a little bit disarming. And all the music, the songs and the score, have to be supporting that world building, living in that world, contributing to the narrative, contributing to the ways in which you relate to the characters. So that to go from, a sort of, like say a straight down the line sort of pop arrangement of a song into an orchestral score, which might work in something like Sing, was never going to work here. And the decisions that we made about the song arrangements had to find their corollary in the decisions we made about the arrangements for the score and the score itself. I didn't want there to be any kind of awkward gear shifts between score and song. I wanted the score to be able to set up the songs so that when the songs arrive, we somehow subliminally already know the melody because we've kind of subtly weaved it into the score and in the build up to the song, and and really make it feel like that the songs just emerge effortlessly from the narrative, from the dialogue, from the action of the scenes.
And absolutely do, which brings us to a question from Aaron Cruz. Hey, Joby, was there any push from Team Wonka to pay tribute to the whimsical and sometimes evil cues that Leslie Briskus created in the 1971 classic? And if so, how did you and Neil prepare to take on Leslie's 12-person crew with just the two of you guys?
No, there wasn't. I mean, I loved that movie. I grew up, I was doing this the other day, and they're saying, that movie came out in 1971. I was like, I came out in 1971 as well. So that film and me are of the same vintage. And I'm sure people know that it wasn't a slam dunk hit, that the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the Gene Wilder 1971 movie. It took a while to grow, and it was the home video market that became its salvation. It was one of those first films to be a hit on video when it hadn't really been in the movie theater. So I was of that generation that saw it as a kid, saw it on TV, then saw it on video, and it's one of those movies that you don't even remember seeing it for the first time. It seems like it was always there. It's like a title like, say, Alice in Wonderland or Wind in the Willows or something, where you just feel those characters are kind of part of your childhood, kind of upbringing. But I quite sort of consciously made the decision that I wasn't going to rewatch it in preparation for writing the score. Just because, I think what they did was amazing, and I didn't want to feel too kind of led by it. Paul has his own take on that world, and I wanted to be led by that and by Neil's songs more than by the weird, fantastical, almost kind of psychedelic approach to the original film. Of course, I did listen to Pure Imagination a lot, and to the various different versions of Pure Imagination that crop up in the movie, because we had to make an arrangement of that song for this and do our own interpretation of it. So, I was struck by just how weird it is. I mean, beautiful, but so strange. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, there's just decisions being made like all the way through that, which they're just. I guess they're just deliberately trying to make something that seems completely off the wall and crazy.
Yeah.
The normal rules do not apply in the world of that 1971 movie.
Over the original, I mean, thank God in this one you're not going to get a subliminal shot of a chicken getting its head cut off.
I forgot about that. Yes, that is there.
I mean, the thing I love about, as much as I absolutely love the Mel Stewart and the Tim Burton versions, there is no way this Willy Wonka is ever going to grow up to be these characters. How did that inform your approach that this is just like a nice guy, unless something horrible happens to him in the sequel?
Well, I mean, yeah, he but I mean, he's supposed to be like. Well, there's two things to say about that. I think one is that I think adults watching the Gene Wilder movie are kind of appalled by the fact that he's quite he doesn't care when these kids are like swept to their deaths or fly up and turn purple like a blueberry and then fly up to the ceiling. As far as they've got it coming as far as he's concerned. But as a kid watching it in the 1970s, I just thought he was like an exciting kind of unknowable kind of weird presence. And then at the very end, you discover why. It's because he's basically been testing Charlie all along, and actually, it's this incredible generosity and this whole backstory of Slugworth and the competitors trying to kind of steal his secrets and everything. That's what's made him cynical, and that's so we meet him in our movie before all that's happened, before he's become cynical, before the world has dealt him these cards that have turned him into this slightly misanthropic curmudgeon. But yeah, I didn't think that how much nicer Timothée Chalamet's take on it is mismatched to what Gene Wilder was like, because you got the sense with Gene Wilder's thing that he was a wonderful, lovely, kind person, but but baddies had kind of given him this slightly edgy disillusioned quality.
Now we've got a question from Louis Versinelli. No, I really enjoyed your soundtrack for Wonka. The score and the songs work to perfection. Now, how did you go about scoring it, and take us through your process? And I guess my question, kind of to spin that, would be, it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because again, I love the way that, when you listen to your underscore parts of it, that the song melody will come into it. I mean, did you come up with like the themes and then you gave them to Neil and say, okay, this could make a great song? Or was it always the case of Neil saying, here's a song, let's write the score, and then coming out of it and doing your own stuff?
Neil's melodies came first. They were already there before I came on board. So they were given. Then it was really a question of finding what in those songs, which fragments of melodies, which little bits of rhythm, which harmonies could be useful, things to sew through, how you could attach them very clearly. I mean, sometimes it's a no-brainer. I mean, there's, say the song Scrub Scrub, that's like Claire's Marine kind of, kind of Lerner and Lowish sort of Boompa vampy number, is obviously that's the music that relates to Olivia Colman and Tom Dose's characters, Scott and Bleacher. So so that whole storyline that sticks with that. But other times it was much more of a journey to discover what little bits of the songs we could use to sew throughout. And there was this whistling melody at the very beginning of the movie when we see Willie on the boat, which, I mean, when I first came on board, I mean, that was pretty much about to hit the cutting room floor. And I was like, whoa, that melody could be really useful as like a sort of hero's melody. And leave that in for now. Let's see whether we can use it. And then, it ends up being the thing that whenever we have an emotional beat with Willie, I mean, it's like we take stock, we come back to that melody. That's like, his kind of hero's journey theme. Then we had Pure Imagination, which originally lived somewhere in the middle of the film, found its way to the beginning and the end of the film, and we come back to it at certain moments. We realized that was going to work really beautifully for Noodle's whole journey of rediscovering her family and her sort of salvation, really, her hopes and dreams, and this kind of ends up being the emotional heart of the film.
Now, Amanda West has a question which kind of relates to this a bit. Now, how often do you work directly with the lyricist? It doesn't even have to be this movie, on a film or television show. And do you think that happens much in our industry, rather than library songs being chosen, you get original songs?
Well, I mean, so I've, just by chance, the last 3 movies I've done have been, movies that have big song components in them. Sing and Sing 1, Sing and Sing 2, and now Wonka. And obviously the songs in Sing are coming from everywhere. I mean, it's kind of the point. You could be going from an Ariana Grande song into a Coldplay song, into an Elton John song, into a old Beatles song, and it's the job of the score to kind of to make the journey between those things seem like it makes any kind of dramatic sense. And Harley Mason Jr. was in charge of the song arrangements for those movies, so I didn't really have very much to do with that at all. Even the new songs they written, but they just landed on my desk fully formed, and I was only really worrying about the score. But with this, all songs from one person, and one person who I just happen to know incredibly well, and I know their musical and lyrical style really well. And the songs, as I say, in some still kind of slightly unformed, I mean, all the songs were in a state where they needed a lot of work to get them to where they are now. And as I say, some of them actually taking them in a quite different direction. And that's the first time I've had the opportunity to do that, and to be in charge of the whole kind of sonic landscape of both the songs and the score, and to be able to collaborate closely with the songwriter and be able to. I was with Neil. I was, one of the first things I did, I said, well, I don't want to just hear where we are now with the songs. I want to hear your original intention. Can you send me the original demos? The next thing I knew, I had access to the Dropbox with just gigabytes and gigabytes of hundreds of different versions of the songs that he'd made over the course he'd been working on the whole thing. So I don't know if that quite answers Anna's question, but those are my experiences of writing movies that have big songs on. I mean, in a couple of other things earlier in my career, I've written big kind of end cues that ended up being replaced by pop songs because everybody likes a pop song at the end of a movie. But certainly, I've never worked on anything where there was any sort of kind of taking shortcuts and just just grabbing stuff off the internet and shoving some lyrics on it. No, that I've been lucky enough to work with filmmakers who are kind of really respect music. Because I think that's as a composer, the directors you want to work with are the ones for whom music is really important. And I've been so lucky to work with Paul King and Garth Jennings, who are both very much directors, not only who love music, because that's not necessarily the most important thing, but they understand music and they understand how much music can bring to the table in a movie. They understand what they can ask a composer to do. So much I watch contemporary films and I just think you're not really leaving any work for the composer to do. You fixed all the problems before a note of music goes on. But these directors know that, just like, Steve Spielberg knows, music can contribute so much, and you can leave. You can have your BMX flying silhouetted against the moon and go over to you, John Williams. That kind of filmmaking is rare, and both Paul King and Garth Jennings are those kind of directors who understand that.
Yeah, and on that note, happy 77th birthday today, Steven Spielberg.
Happy birthday, Steve. Nothing better to do this time.
So we've got a question from Joshua David Mitchell. You do so much concert music, so my interest is always piqued when you choose to work on a film. What about a given film compels you to make the commitment to score it?
Well, I think I slightly answered that in the last question. Actually, it's true. I'm unusual in that I do films when I want to do films, and I do a lot of in recent years. I've done a lot of music for ballet. I've written 3 full evening-length ballets with the choreographer Christopher Wheeldon, which were 2 of them were commissions between the Royal Ballet, co-commissions between the Royal Ballet in London and the National Ballet of Canada, and then this most recent one, which was based on Like Water for Chocolate, the Laura Esquivel novel and the movie from the 90s, Mexican movie. So a lot of chocolate in my life recently, oddly. And that was a co-commission between the Royal Ballet and the American Ballet Theatre. So that was Covent Garden at the Met last summer. And, that I'm incredibly fortunate in that I get to work with these different kinds of collaborators in these different fields with amazing musicians, but, some live music making, some recorded music making. And, I always figure that every time you do a project, you learn so much more about, the craft of being a composer, and especially the craft of telling stories through music. And I've been, the opportunities come along, and you find collaborators you really know you want to stick with. And if you think about the great relationships between directors and composers, it's where the stars align and the aesthetic between the 2 people just works so well. And that's the holy grail, really, is if you find a director, choreographer, a librettist or lyricist, where that you want to kind of you develop a shorthand very quickly, you understand each other, there's mutual respect going on, and then those are the projects you're really going to want to take. When you start working with a director, a new director, it's always fraught with difficulty because you don't have that shorthand of communication that comes only from the experience of actually making stuff and seeing it through from start to finish.
I want to do a flashback, I think, to 2 kind of fairy tale scores long before you did this, both really wonderful kind of unsung movies. One is Penelope and the other is Franklin.
Franklin, yeah. I was chatting with Gerald McMorrow, who directed Franklin only today, actually. He's done a lovely little short called Embers about climate change. It's a Douglas Adams short story that is I don't know when it's coming out, but we're all everyone's just mucking because it's such a good cause. I loved working on both those films. Penelope, as you say, it was a wonderful director, Mark Polanski, and he it was a tricky project to work on. There was some kind of fallings out between the different producers and between, I don't know, a lot of differences of opinion about how the movie should pan out, and then it got bought by one company and then sold on to another and then recut, and and it was in limbo for years. I mean, this happens more often than you think. I mean, for no real reason either. I mean, the movie was great from the off. Wonderful performance from James McAvoy and Christina Ricci. And I got to write a sort of dark fairy tale-ish score, and then rather not dissimilar from what I've got to do with Wonka. I hadn't, until you brought it up when we were chatting earlier, I hadn't really made a connection between those two movies. And then yes, Franklin, which was a sort of dystopian sci-fi kind of come psychological kind of thriller with Ryan Philippe and Eva Green, was a lovely film, and again a bit too overlooked, and a similarly visually striking aesthetic, a really interesting piece of world building that looked, it had references to things you might have seen before, but the overall sort of the holistic kind of impact of it I thought was very unusual and very original, and I love doing both those movies.
Yeah, I love Franklin. Now Aaron has got a question. I've been a fan of your work since first impulsively buying a cassette of Promenade in '94. This is a fairly banal question, but I always like to know, was there a moment in watching a film in your youth where you heard a score or cue even that set off the "I want to do that" light bulb?
Well, that's very nice to hear, and yes, the cassette kind of dates it, doesn't it? And I love that album. That was the first album I worked on with Neil back in late '93. I went into the studio in Wapping in East London, I met him once, as I said earlier, in a pub. I went in with my oboe and English horn and my beaten up old smelly saxophone that I'd swapped for a leather jacket with a friend of mine at college. Couldn't really play it very well. And played on most of the songs on that album for Neil. That was that day at this kind of crummy studio in Wapping that kind of cemented our working relationship. I think that's when we both realised that we kind of liked working together and this was going to go somewhere. Didn't necessarily know it was going to go to here, but hey, everything's got to start somewhere, hasn't it? When did I start wanting to write film? I mean, the first things I did, and it was such a brilliant way to start, was I got commissioned by the British Film Institute to write a score for the Alfred Hitchcock Ivor Novello vehicle, The Lodger, from 1926 or something, silent movie. And scoring silent movies is such an education for if I was teaching like a movie composition course, I would, that's what I'd do. I'd get everybody a silent movie to score, because you learn so much. Because the music has to really work hard. No dialogue to fall back on, no sound effects. It's the music is occupying that entire auditory level of the film experience. And I really, really, really enjoyed doing that. And I think that was the thing that kind of got me going. But as a kid, going and seeing Star Wars, that's just being blown away by that music. I think I was always listening. I wrote, I started playing the piano when I was 6, and noodling away, making up my own stuff was a lot more fun than practicing scales. So I ended up actually playing my first composition in public at a school concert when I was 9. It was kind of rubbish, but still, I still was doing it back then. So it was always something like from a very early age that I was trying to do, and I'd sit there at the piano and I'd have kind of scenarios in my head, and I would kind of improvise music to them. I don't think that's that unusual. I remember my son doing a similar thing when he was a kid. And then seeing all these great movies when I was a kid. I saw Bambi about 50 times, and then when I was the perfect age to see Star Wars for the first time. I saw it once when it came out, when I was a little bit too young. Then I saw it again in a double bill with The Empire Strikes Back, and it was like seeing your dream realized on the screen. I was like, oh, the golden robot guy and the blasters. I remember this. It was like stuff that I wasn't. When you were very young, you don't know whether memories are really memories or is it something you imagine. And it was like that, and that was like probably the day that changed my life. I mean, so yes, I mean, I wish I had a slightly less, generic, straight down the line answer. But if there was one movie, it was Star Wars.
That's my crazy rescue dog chasing a squirrel.
Okay.
Now we got a question from Dale. Divine Comedy's time watching is incredible. The strings, the writing, the chord changes. Is it all you're doing? And how did you approach this back then? And were you getting scoring offers even back then?
About that. Time watching, yes. Actually, that's an interesting one because time watching is on an earlier album that predates my involvement. It was on Liberation, and it's a string quartet arrangement on that Neil did himself. I mean, as I said, I mean, he's an incredible. He plays everything by ear. He reads music sort of just about, not really, but he can hear a 4-part arrangement in his head, and he just about had the wherewithal to be able to write it down. When we did the album in '97, short album about love, he was never really happy with how time watching sounded, and he thought it would be great to do live. We recorded that album live at Shepherd's Bush Empire, just down the road from where I'm talking to you now. And so yes, it was sort of over to me to take that string quartet version and turn it into what it is now. So the answer to the question is no, it wasn't all me. Well, so much of it came from Neil, but then I took it to what I hope is a whole other level and really worked hard on that arrangement. And I have to say that was another really kind of formative moment in my career. The record label said that they weren't prepared to pay for an orchestra to play on this album unless we could deliver a gig, all the B-sides, and a whole lot of visual content all at the same time. So we had a day basically to do everything. So we recorded the album in 2 sessions in the morning and afternoon, which also served as sound checks. And then they opened the door to the crowd, and then we played it all again live. And when we got to time watching, all the band left the stage, leaving just Neil and the orchestra on stage. And it was towards the end of the evening. And of course, what we were trying to do was we were just like kind of fairly hectic, most sort of Anglo-Irish indie band. This isn't like Burt Bacharach, but we didn't know really what we were doing. And coming back on stage after time watching and just listening to the reaction it got from the crowd was, firstly I thought, thank goodness we've actually this has all gone okay as we hoped. And then just the sense that this was really, really special. This is one of those moments. Usually you're like so busy kind of trying to hit deadlines, trying not to mess things up, that you don't get the opportunity to just have a moment to just bask in how well it went. I think this is a pretty great place to be.
Now, Andrew just got back from the cinema. I saw Wonka. The score is fantastic. Congratulations. Is there any possibility the score or the sheet music will be released for study or concert purposes?
The score, I don't know about that. I know they're releasing piano vocal arrangements of all the songs and a few of the cues, because I've been proofreading them. So I guess they'll be available online pretty. And Alfred Music, I think, is putting them out. So that'll be those will be available. So those have got, and I've gone through and I've made sure there's all the right chords and all the right melody and the right words. So they're because I remember as a kid, going and seeing a movie and really loving the score and buying the sheet music, and then you get this thing where it's clearly all wrong. That wasn't the right chord. So anyway, so there's that. But whether they'll release the full scores, I mean, the thing about a movie like this though is what do we mean by the full scores? Because we were just going into the studios and recording, say like a band, a combo, like drums, bass, guitar, keys, percussion, and then going in again a few weeks later to record like a big band, and then going in again to record the strings, and every time the arrangements evolve as you go along, and the songs evolve. Everything's changing. It's there kind of aren't in existence at the moment arrangements that on a page that have all the different elements. They all were done in different sessions with different pieces of paper flying around. But it would be good if they were kind of visible, wouldn't it? And I should kind of do. I know people like John Powell do. There's really neat things where you can actually follow the score and they'll post it on YouTube, whatever. I need to find out whether I'm allowed to do things like that, because it would be neat. I mean, what me and my team, did with this movie, I think it was a huge amount of work and really ambitious. I mean, you don't want it to sound ambitious, do you? You don't want anyone coming out of the movie going, wow, the thing that struck me was how ambitious the score was. You want them to come out and go, having fallen in love with Timothée Chalamet, and just having and laugh their socks off at the comedy. But yeah, we were trying really ambitious stuff. And Paul King is a director who he will never settle for anything other than the best possible thing. And so we're all hugely proud of the work we did. And I'd love it if people were able to look at what we did on the stage. Yeah.
I'd say he got it. I mean, it's such a wonderful film. People didn't know what to expect, given the prequels and sequels, and do we really need this? And it really just came out really magically, just so much better than anyone expected it to be. And it's done #1 at the box office this weekend. People really love this film. Are you surprised? Were you like, oh my God, what are people gonna think? And what's your reaction to just seeing the outpouring that the film's getting?
Well, I mean, I don't know how kind of how freely I can speak, but it was not, as I said earlier on, it was not an easy ride. This was not a straightforward process. But I remember this first time I saw the film, I thought, there's a great film here. They haven't quite found it yet, but I knew that my involvement was going to be key. Because as I say, Paul is relying a lot on music to do a lot of heavy lifting emotionally and in terms of narrative, and also the music is really going to help you relate to these characters. And I could see that week on week, month on month, it was getting better and better and better and closer to what it needed to be. But then I saw it at a screening and the final dub. So this is maybe like 4 or 5 days before it was finally delivered. And there was just a sense in the room that, oh my God, we're really onto something here. And I remember, and I was tearing up at the end. And you don't tend to tear up onto a project that you've been working so closely on, for so long. I mean, you're kind of immune to its charms by the end, you'd think. And the fact that I found myself kind of, really moved in a good, positive way by the end made me think, you know what, this is going to be great. So I was just excited. I was just excited for people to see it. And the premiere in London was just a treat.
You're not alone. I got choked up at the ending. I mean, like when you're seeing essentially the diagram of the chocolate, it's literally like you're watching the Enterprise get built.
Yeah.
And it's again, like it taps into something of your childhood. To sing the song that you've loved forever come together with these iconic characters, and I mean, you just can't help but be moved by that.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's when a film is as ambitious as this, it's so easy for it to lose its way. So easy for things to not land. I mean, just the fact that everybody keeps bursting into song. I mean, that clearly in real life that doesn't happen. So how can you do that and make it work in a way that brings you closer to the characters rather than pushing you away from them? Because I mean, obviously, the more real feeling a film is, the more it can sort of hit you, punch you in the heart. And this film, it isn't real feeling. It's a very strange mannered kind of world, where the entire city could just burst into song together at any given moment. So we have to, celebrate that and the wondrousness of that, but at the same time, try and make it feel real enough for you to really kind of relate to the emotions and actually care about these people and be happy for them when things go right, and kind of heart and mouth when things go wrong.
Well, to wrap up our show, I mean, obviously this movie's a big old success, and I think we're definitely going to have a sequel to this. Hopefully, not one where Wonka goes dark and becomes Gene Wilder. Where do you see the score going? Where do you see the songs going?
I haven't even thought about it. I mean, I don't even know if there's a plan for a sequel. I mean, I think I heard a little bit of conversation between Paul King and Mark Everson, the editor, at one point, sort of. But I don't feel it's my place to kind of, it's sort of, you don't want to jinx it, do you? You don't want to, like, it'd be presumptuous when the film hasn't yet come out to start talking about the sequel. I mean, with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I mean, that was like, if you remember that movie, the final scene was like so set up for like the perfect segue into the sequel. And of course, there was a next book in that trilogy of books. It's a trilogy of 4 parts, isn't it? But it never got made. So, you can't count your chickens. So I don't know. I don't know if they have a plan, and if they do have a plan, what it would be, and whether it would really depend on whether it existed in the same world. I mean, that world that we're in, which has a sort of down at heel kind of folky charm with the sort of dulcimers and the celeste and the banjos, and like Neil described it, he liked the banjo because it was like the international shorthand for sort of poverty. As soon as you hear a banjo play, lonely banjo plucking, it tells you all you need to know about the financial state of the people on stage. And then that contrasting with this very glamorous, big band, jazzy world of the Chocolate Cartel, who are forever, they're never not pouring themselves another martini in some beautiful oak-lined kind of parlor. So yeah, I mean, maybe if it does take place in that world, then I guess we would be following along the same lines with those choices of instrumentation. But who knows? It could go anyway, couldn't it? It's the beauty. It's a world of pure imagination, after all.
Absolutely, Joby. I just want to thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to watch Wonka in theaters with the song and score soundtrack, available now on Water Tower Music. I want to give a big thanks to Mark Northam, our producer Dale Turner, Jeff Sanderson at Chasen and Company, and Rocco Carrozza at Water Tower Music for providing our sweet promos. And thanks to you all for joining our videocasts this year. And stay tuned, as we've got some real treats in store for 2024 at Film Music Live. We'll see you soon.